she carried a pain no one could ever see, a quiet ache tucked away beneath the routine of her days. Every morning, Meher moved through the motions of life, her hands folding laundry, her voice calling the children for breakfast, her smile soft and practiced, as if the weight pressing against her chest did not exist. The world saw a mother who managed her household with gentle efficiency, who remembered everyone's needs before her own. But no one noticed the silent battles waged within her. Some mornings, she lingered by the window, watching sunlight scatter across the neighborhood, imagining a life where her own heart's desires mattered as much as the people around her. She remembered evenings from years ago when she had quietly dreamed of painting, of traveling, of writing letters that would never reach anyone, of small rebellions she had never dared. Now, those dreams existed only as shadows in the corners of her mind, delicate whispers drowned by the demands of family, the unspoken rules of duty, and the constant expectation to endure without complaint. Her children's laughter filled the hallways, bright and careless, a sound she loved with all her heart, and yet envied for its freedom. Each giggle reminded her of what she had surrendered, of the sleepless nights she had endured to soothe feverish bodies, of the meals she had prepared while her own stomach ached, of the times she had worn a smile when all she wanted was to weep. She remembered a morning when her youngest had asked, "Mom, why do you look so tired?" She had smiled, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Just thinking, sweetheart." No one knew that thinking was a lifetime compressed into a single moment of exhaustion and quiet despair. There were days when the house seemed to press in on her, walls closing with whispers of unmet dreams, of sacrifices invisible to all but herself. Conversations with her husband, once the source of comfort, had grown routine, almost transactional, carrying undertones of expectation and misunderstanding. He noticed the children, the bills, the meals, the schedule, but never the hollow spaces inside her, the hours she spent patching together her own fragments to remain the mother they needed. Meher's mother had once told her, in a rare moment of vulnerability, that women like them were made to endure quietly, to place the happiness of others above their own. At the time, Meher had nodded, believing that her strength would be rewarded in some unseen way. But years later, she understood that endurance alone did not heal the heart. Pain carried in silence seeped into the corners of life, coloring moments that should have been bright, weighing on decisions, twisting joy into something fragile and fleeting. At the market, she moved through the aisles with practiced efficiency, greeting neighbors with a soft smile, nodding politely, concealing the tempest within. Each interaction demanded a performance, friendly, composed, patient. And yet, in the quiet of the produce aisle, she sometimes let a single tear fall, a small rebellion against the armor she wore daily. A woman passing by offered a polite smile, oblivious to the layers of struggle beneath Meher's calm exterior. Her children's milestones were the most bittersweet reminders of her hidden pain. School performances, birthday parties, simple drawings, heartfelt notes. They were proof of her love, yes, but also a mirror reflecting all that she had given silently, without recognition. She cherished these gifts, yet each one whispered of her own dreams deferred, of nights spent awake while the world slept, of laughter that masked a hollow echo of longing. Evenings brought no relief. After the last child had gone to bed, after the house had quieted and the hum of appliances faded, Meher would retreat to a corner of the living room or her bedroom. She would sink into a chair, tracing the fabric of a worn cushion, feeling the pulse of her own heartbeat loud in the stillness. Memories came, unbidden moments of joy and sorrow, of choices made and paths forgone, of sacrifices rendered invisible by the love she bore. It was in these moments she felt both the weight and the value of her own resilience. Her friends often called, asking for casual gatherings or chats, but Meher's replies were brief, polite, careful. She could not explain the depth of her exhaustion or the complexity of her emotional landscape without sounding like a burden. And she had learned long ago that burdening others was not an option. So she smiled, thanked them, and returned to the quiet, the small room where her pain could exist without judgment or explanation. Sometimes, a memory of her childhood would resurface, reminding her of the spirited girl she once was, of dreams scribbled in notebooks hidden under her bed, of ambitions unspoken but alive. She would touch those memories gently, as though handling fragile glass, feeling both their beauty and their loss. Each recollection was a silent witness to the woman she had become, a mother defined by love, by sacrifice, by the invisible burdens she carried. And yet, even in this quiet storm, Meher found small moments of grace. A child's innocent hug, the smile of her husband when she brought him tea just the way he liked it, a neighbor's passing kindness. These were the sparks that reminded her that life, though heavy, still contained fragments of light. It was not the absence of pain that defined her, but the courage to keep moving forward despite it, to create warmth and happiness for others, while tending to the fragile flame of her own heart in secret. Before motherhood, Meher's life had been a tapestry of small dreams and quiet determination. Born in a modest neighborhood, she had grown up watching her mother work tirelessly, stitching clothes and cleaning houses to make ends meet. Childhood for Meher had been simple, but not easy. She learned early that life demanded sacrifices, that resilience was not a choice, but a necessity. She had loved to draw, to read stories that spoke of adventure and freedom, but the realities around her often overshadowed those playful escapes. School had been a sanctuary of sorts, a place where her laughter could bloom unchecked, where she could imagine a life beyond the narrow walls of her home. Teachers noticed her curiosity, neighbors admired her politeness, yet no one could see the hunger for something more that shimmered quietly in her eyes. She had friends, yes, but they drifted apart, moving on to lives that seemed larger, brighter, while Meher remained rooted, tethered to responsibilities she hadn't chosen, but could not ignore. Meeting her future husband, Samir, had been like a story unfolding unexpectedly. He had charm, warmth, promise of stability that appealed to both practicality and the heart's quiet hopes. At first, their life together was a gentle rhythm of shared laughter, small adventures, and whispered dreams. Meher remembered the evenings they spent walking along the narrow streets, hands entwined, talking about future plans, how many children to have, where to live, how to balance work and family. There had been hope, real and tangible, that life would nurture both love and dreams. But soon, responsibilities arrived like a tide, pulling away the leisure and freedom they had imagined. Samir's job demanded more hours, and Meher found herself managing household duties, family expectations, and the early stirrings of motherhood. The joy of pregnancy was layered with apprehension. Each morning, she would wake feeling both awe and fear, aware that a tiny life depended on her, while she still carried the weight of her own unfulfilled desires. When her first child, a daughter, was born, Meher felt an overwhelming rush of love that eclipsed everything else. Yet, even in that joy, there was a subtle ache, a sense that she had begun to vanish into her new identity, that the woman who had once dreamed freely now existed only as a caretaker, a provider, a silent anchor for her family. She cherished every smile, every milestone, yet each moment reminded her that personal ambitions had been shelved indefinitely. Extended family added another layer to her life's complexity. Her in-laws were kind in appearance, but firm in expectations. They valued discipline, appearances, and conformity. Meher learned quickly to navigate these waters, masking frustration with politeness, fatigue with patience. Every decision, from what meals to prepare to how to handle the children's schooling, was scrutinized. She had to be perfect, or at least appear so, and the slightest misstep was a quiet reminder of her invisible struggle. Her friendships suffered under this weight. Calls and visits became rare, the spontaneity of youth replaced by careful planning and prioritization. Even when she tried to reach out, she often found herself exhausted, her mind already racing through the tasks awaiting her at home. Loneliness had become a companion, soft yet persistent, threading through her days, unnoticed. Children multiplied the layers of her life's tapestry. With each child, the love expanded, but so did the work, the sleepless nights, the worries. She remembered nights cradling her newborn while her older child whispered for attention, feeling torn, guilty, yet resolute. She learned to balance, to stretch her energy beyond normal limits, to be the mother who was always present, even when invisible. Meher's husband, though loving, remained largely unaware of the depth of her struggle. His eyes saw the tidy house, the fed children, the well-prepared meals, but rarely the storm behind her quiet composure. He believed in her strength, praised her resilience, yet never asked about the cost. And perhaps Meher herself had never articulated it, afraid that speaking her pain might somehow diminish her role, or worse, create conflict where none existed before. Even small decisions became intricate exercises in diplomacy. When her daughter expressed interest in music lessons, Meher had to weigh time, finances, and expectations. When the children bickered, she mediated silently, absorbing tension, shielding them from the emotional toll of adult complexities. Every sacrifice went unnoticed, every effort invisible to the untrained eye. Through all this, Meher's own identity existed in fleeting moments, early mornings before anyone else woke, when she could write in a journal, sketch on scraps of paper, or simply breathe. These minutes were sacred, brief respites from a life that demanded constant giving. They were her only touchstones to the person she had once been, reminders that under the layers of caregiving, there remained a woman capable of thought, creativity, and longing. Yet the most poignant aspect of her life was the invisible dialogue she maintained with herself. Thoughts unspoken to anyone else, reflections on choices made, dreams deferred, fears harbored quietly, they formed the undercurrent of her existence. She would rehearse conversations in her mind, imagine supportive responses from the people who rarely offered them, and sometimes, in the stillness of night, let herself weep freely, knowing no one would see. Even mundane chores became a stage for silent storytelling. Folding laundry was not just folding clothes, but a meditation on patience and endurance. Preparing meals was not only nutrition, but an act of love disguised as routine. Every stitch, every sweep, every whispered instruction carried meaning beyond its surface, an unspoken testimony to the unseen labor that defined her days. And through it all, the essence of Meher's being remained resilient, not because the world acknowledged it, but because she recognized it herself. Her family's happiness, their growth and well-being, were reflections of her quiet determination, her capacity to love fiercely without fanfare, to endure hardship without complaint. Every smile she coaxed from her children, every small victory in household harmony, became a silent affirmation. Her life, though heavy with unseen burdens, held profound purpose. There were mornings when Meher moved through the house almost like a shadow, invisible even to those who depended on her. She carried groceries up the stairs, arranged breakfast, checked homework, all while silently calculating the bills she needed to pay, the appointments to keep, the errands nobody knew existed. Every movement was precise, efficient, and yet weighted with an exhaustion that no one could measure. What no one realized was that behind her calm exterior, Meher was constantly negotiating with herself. Should she voice her fatigue, her frustration, her unspoken desires? Or should she swallow them, preserve the illusion of harmony, and bear the quiet ache in solitude? Most days, she chose the latter, believing that her pain, though real, was less important than the happiness of her family. There were secrets she had never shared. She had once dreamed of traveling to distant cities, of studying art, of writing stories that spoke of love, loss, and courage. All those ambitions were carefully stored away, hidden like fragile glass, broken pieces she feared would shatter if she dared touch them. Sometimes, at night, she would sit by the window and imagine what her life might have been. A small sigh would escape, barely audible, swallowed by the soft hum of the neighborhood outside. Her children, innocent and full of life, unknowingly added her inner tension. When her eldest daughter brought home a drawing of a happy family, Meher forced herself to smile, even though her own heart ached. Each child represented joy, yes, but also responsibility, a weight that grew heavier with each passing day. She cooked their favorite meals, listened to their endless chatter, attended school meetings, and smoothed over conflicts, all while feeling the relentless pull of unseen burdens. The neighbors, ever polite, often remarked on her composure. "She manages everything so well," they would say, unaware that every word of praise was like a thin layer of plaster over the cracks in Meher's spirit. She had become an expert at masking fatigue, at hiding tears behind smiles, at performing the role society expected. And yet, beneath the practiced exterior, there was a storm raging, a tangle of doubt, pain, and longing that had no outlet. Her marriage, though functional, carried undercurrents of tension. Samir, her husband, provided support in material ways, yet rarely engaged with the emotional intricacies of her life. Conversations often revolved around logistics bills, groceries, schedules, rarely touching on feelings or shared dreams. Meher learned to nod, to agree, to move silently alongside him, guarding the fragments of herself that she could not let go. There were moments of temptation to speak out, to confess the depth of her struggle. A late evening, when the children were asleep, and the house held only the quiet whisper of her thoughts, she would imagine telling Samir everything. She would picture his eyes softening with understanding, his arms around her in comfort. Yet, each imagined confession ended in hesitation. How could she disrupt the fragile balance of family life, even if it meant revealing her own truths? Meher's secrets extended beyond emotional struggle. She had once faced moments of deep financial anxiety, nights when she wondered if there would be enough to cover the bills, enough to provide for the children's needs. She had navigated these crises silently, taking extra shifts, saving every coin, hiding the worry behind calm words and reassuring gestures. Her children slept peacefully, unaware of the silent wars their mother waged on their behalf. Even small conflicts added layers to her secret suffering. When her husband argued over minor misunderstandings, or when neighbors' expectations clashed with her own, Meher bore the weight alone. She had learned to diffuse tensions with smiles and careful words, but each resolution left her spirit slightly more frayed. The house remained harmonious, the children content, and the world oblivious to the relentless dedication and sacrifice happening behind closed doors. In the quiet of her bedroom, she sometimes revisited moments of personal joy lost to duty. Sketchbooks from her youth, half-finished novels, letters unsent, all were relics of a self she could not fully inhabit anymore. Each artifact whispered reminders of the life she had set aside, of passions sacrificed, of a voice silenced for the sake of others. She touched these items reverently, allowing herself brief communion with the woman she had once been, before returning to the roles demanded of her. The hidden struggles were not only emotional, but physical. Meher's health often took a backseat to the needs of others. Sleepless nights, skipped meals, endless cleaning and caregiving, they extracted a toll that manifested as fatigue, headaches, and aches she quietly endured. She understood that a mother's body could bend and stretch to meet demands, yet even she wondered how long it could hold under the pressure of unseen burdens. Secrets also existed in moments of quiet rebellion. Occasionally, she would indulge in a small treat for herself, a book purchased in secrecy, a walk taken while the children played nearby. These fleeting acts of self-preservation became her lifeline, little reminders that she existed beyond her identity as caretaker, that she deserved brief glimpses of joy despite the weight she carried. And still, the most profound secrets were those unspoken to the children themselves. She shielded them from arguments, from worries about finances, from moments of her own despair. They saw the meals, the laughter, the bedtime stories, but never the hours she spent crying quietly, the fear that she was not enough, the overwhelming sense of responsibility that often left her hollow. She bore these truths alone, a silent sentinel guarding the innocence and happiness of her family. Yet even in this landscape of secrecy and struggle, Meher's strength shone. It was not the strength applauded in public, not the one recognized with awards or praise. It was quiet, resilient, invisible, and relentless. She moved through her days with a grace that belied the inner turmoil, carrying the burdens of many while appearing to carry none. Every act of love, every meal cooked, every school project completed, every hug given without reservation was a testament to her hidden fortitude. There were nights, however, when the hidden pain pressed too heavily. Meher would sit by the window, hands clasped, staring at the stars that seemed so distant yet comforting. She would whisper to herself, words she would never speak aloud. I am tired. I am more than enough. I am still here. These whispered affirmations became a ritual, a reminder that even in solitude, she maintained connection to her own spirit, her own resilience, her own humanity. In this intricate dance of duty, secrecy, and sacrifice, Meher learned subtle lessons about life. She understood that love often meant endurance, that strength was measured not in recognition, but in persistence, and that sometimes the most important victories were invisible to everyone but herself. Each day, each challenge, each hidden struggle added layers to her identity, shaping a mother who carried not only the weight of her family, but the quiet heroism of unseen devotion. Life, despite Meher's careful orchestration, had a way of testing the limits of her endurance. The small, everyday struggles that had once seemed manageable now collided into a storm of relentless pressure. Her eldest daughter, Zara, began school in a new neighborhood, and with it came unexpected challenges. Zara's teachers complained about her being distracted. Her classmates teased her for minor things. At home, Meher felt the weight of responsibility double. She worked tirelessly to comfort Zara, to teach patience, to shield her from ridicule, all while ensuring the household ran smoothly. Her husband, Samir, was aware of the minor issues, but failed to perceive their emotional magnitude. He offered advice, solutions, a plan here or there, but no empathy, no recognition of the emotional labor Meher was investing in every whispered word and every soothing hug. She loved him, but the disconnect carved a silent rift, an invisible space filled with unspoken frustration. The tension at home increased when an old family friend unexpectedly arrived. Farah, vibrant and outspoken, seemed to effortlessly balance career and family. Her presence, though innocent, highlighted everything Meher had set aside. Farah's casual remarks about personal dreams and achievements, questions about art, writing, or travel stirred memories of the ambitions Meher had buried long ago. Each comment, each laugh shared between Farah and Samir made Meher feel simultaneously proud of her resilience and painfully aware of her own compromises. Meanwhile, financial strain emerged as another silent adversary. A sudden car repair, a medical bill for a distant relative, unplanned school fees, all arrived like a series of waves, crashing relentlessly. Meher meticulously calculated budgets, rearranged priorities, and sacrificed personal necessities. The stress gnawed at her, but she bore it quietly. She could not afford to falter. The illusion of control, of stability, had to be maintained at all costs. Even within her own family, small conflicts began to rise like undercurrents. Her younger son, Aryan, grew frustrated with limits imposed by rules and routines. Arguments over homework, bedtimes, and meals, though seemingly trivial, carried emotional weight. Meher mediated with patience, absorbing the tension silently, smoothing the frictions so they never erupted beyond the home's carefully maintained walls. Each resolution cost her a measure of peace, but she bore it without complaint, understanding that the well-being of her children depended on her constancy. The house itself, once a sanctuary, now seemed like a battleground of subtle anxieties. Messes left by children, minor accidents, missed deadlines, all became triggers for quiet internal turmoil. Meher found herself snapping occasionally at small mistakes, then immediately retreating into guilt. Each day ended with her retreating into solitude, replaying the events of the day, analyzing her own reactions, questioning her adequacy as a mother, as a wife, as a human being. A turning point came when Zara, frustrated and confused, lashed out during dinner one evening. Her words were sharp, unintended, but cutting. "You don't understand me. Nobody does." Meher felt a pang deep inside. She wanted to explain, to share her hidden struggles, but the timing never felt right. Instead, she hugged Zara tightly, whispered soothing words, and carried her own hurt silently, absorbing it as she had absorbed so many others. Simultaneously, Samir faced pressures at work, his stress spilling into their interactions. Miscommunications became frequent. Simple disagreements escalated into tense exchanges. Meher found herself juggling multiple emotional storms, children's needs, her husband's frustrations, her own buried pain. Each day demanded immense resilience, and each night left her physically drained, yet emotionally vigilant. There were moments when she felt utterly alone. In the quiet of her bedroom, she would whisper her fears to the night, imagining responses that never came. She feared breaking, feared faltering, feared revealing the depth of her anguish. Yet she continued, driven by an unwavering sense of duty, love, and responsibility. An unexpected crisis emerged when Arian fell ill with a high fever, and the local clinic's treatment was delayed due to an administrative error. Meher's worry escalated rapidly. Her mind raced through worst-case scenarios. She held Arian in her arms all night, her own exhaustion ignored, her prayers whispered into the darkness. It was a night where sleep, peace, and comfort became distant concepts, and the full weight of her role pressed unbearably on her shoulders. The next morning, she discovered a letter from her mother, expressing concern about Meher's health and the sacrifices she was making silently. The letter became a mirror, reflecting back the enormity of the life Meher had taken on alone. She realized that despite her tireless efforts, her sacrifices often went unseen, unacknowledged, and underappreciated. Through all these escalating conflicts, Meher began to recognize patterns in her own endurance. She had long believed that pain was a private affair, that her struggles were hers alone to bear. But now, faced with the cumulative weight of multiple challenges, her children's emotional needs, financial strains, her husband's disconnection, and her own deferred dreams, she sensed the urgent necessity to reevaluate her approach. The narrative tension reached its apex when an unexpected incident occurred at Zara's school. A teacher called with urgent news. Zara had been bullied by peers, emotionally shaken, and feeling isolated. Meher's heart constricted. She left everything aside and rushed to the school, her mind a torrent of worry, anger, and determination. On the drive, she reflected on her own childhood, the lessons of endurance and resilience passed down from her mother, and the responsibilities she had assumed almost unconsciously. At the school, she confronted the situation with grace, courage, and subtle strength, navigating both administrative protocols and her daughter's emotional turmoil. Zara clung to her, whispering apologies and fears, and Meher held her close, absorbing the child's pain while containing her own. This incident became a microcosm of Meher's life, a ceaseless cycle of absorbing pain, solving crises, and protecting others, all while the world remained largely unaware of the sacrifices and suffering behind her composure. Back at home, the evening brought a fragile calm. Meher, though exhausted, reflected on the day's events. She recognized that conflict, though inevitable, also revealed her inner resilience. Each challenge, each secret struggle, each emotional confrontation reinforced her identity as a mother who could endure, adapt, and protect. The weight of unseen pain remained, yet in its shadow, a quiet strength emerged, an unspoken acknowledgement of her own capacity to survive and nurture, even in the most tumultuous of circumstances. And so the storm of conflict escalated and subsided in waves, leaving Meher standing in the center of it all. A woman of immense fortitude, whose invisible struggles shaped the lives around her, whose silent sacrifices remained unrecognized, and whose hidden pain was both a burden and a testament to the depth of her love. The weight Meher had carried silently for years was nearing a breaking point. A routine afternoon brought an unexpected revelation, one that would shake the carefully constructed walls of her private endurance. Zara, her eldest daughter, stumbled upon an old box tucked away in the attic, filled with sketches, journals, and letters Meher had written in secret over the years. Pages filled with dreams deferred, whispered frustrations, moments of longing for a life beyond responsibility. Everything Meher had hidden from the world now lay exposed in the hands of her child. Zara sat on the attic floor, flipping through the papers, curiosity mingling with awe. "Mom, did you?" she whispered, eyes wide with disbelief. Each page revealed a Meher that Zara had never known, a woman who had dreams, fears, and desires outside of the family she cherished. The realization struck like lightning. Her mother's life had been lived largely in silent sacrifice, her own joys postponed, her own struggles masked behind patience and smiles. Meher, hearing the muffled whispers, froze. The attic seemed smaller, the sunlight filtering through the window, casting a golden hue on the papers scattered across the floor. She did not know whether to feel exposed or relieved. The weight she had carried alone for so long was now shared, at least in understanding, even if only with her daughter. Zara approached her mother, holding the journals with trembling hands. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she asked, voice tinged with both confusion and concern. Meher's lips quivered, and for a moment, the silence between them spoke volumes. She knelt down, gathering Zara into her arms, and whispered, "Because I wanted you to grow happy, without worry. I didn't want my struggles to become yours." In that embrace, the unspoken bond of sacrifice and love was suddenly illuminated. Zara saw her mother not just as the woman who cooked, cleaned, and tended to every need, but as someone whose life had been quietly monumental in its devotion. It was a revelation that reshaped her understanding, a new lens through which she viewed her mother's existence. Later that evening, Meher confronted her husband, Samir, with a fragile courage she had never summoned before. The journal pages, carefully laid on the dining table, became the bridge between silent endurance and mutual understanding. She spoke of her struggles, her sacrifices, the unspoken pain she had carried for years. Samir listened, first in stunned silence, then with deep reflection. His gaze softened, a mixture of remorse and admiration forming in his eyes. For the first time, he truly saw Meher not just as a wife, not just as a mother, but as a woman of immense strength and layered complexity. The children, having observed fragments of the conversation, began to understand the depth of their mother's devotion. They realized that each bedtime story, each meal prepared, each whispered word of encouragement had been a labor of love, performed while Meher bore burdens invisible to all. Their innocent eyes now held a new empathy, a respect that transcended simple gratitude. As the night deepened, Meher felt a release she had not anticipated. The tension of years of hidden struggle, the weight of dreams postponed, the silent battles with exhaustion and expectation, it all began to ease slightly. Not because the struggles disappeared, but because they were acknowledged, shared, understood. The revelation had shifted something fundamental in her world. Pain that had been invisible was now visible, recognized by those who mattered most. In the following days, subtle changes unfolded. Samir took more initiative at home, mindful of the invisible labor Meher had carried. He began to engage with the children more actively, not only in practical matters, but in emotional connection, recognizing the weight Meher had borne alone. Zara, inspired by the glimpses into her mother's past, pursued creative projects with encouragement and empathy, understanding the sacrifices and joys intertwined in each decision. Meher herself felt transformation within. She realized that her endurance, while still vital, need not be solitary. The emotional revelation had forged new connections, strengthened bonds, and allowed space for dialogue, empathy, and shared responsibility. She could still be the steadfast mother, the unwavering caretaker. But now, she was also a woman whose inner life was recognized, whose dreams were acknowledged, whose pain was shared rather than silently endured. The family dynamics shifted subtly, but profoundly. Conversations became richer, more open, threaded with understanding rather than assumption. The children expressed gratitude in ways small, yet deeply meaningful. Samir, once blind to the depths of Meher's sacrifices, now engaged with awareness and care. And Meher, carrying the twin burdens of love and responsibility, began to feel the lightness of connection, the relief of being truly seen. Yet the emotional reveal did not erase past struggles, it reframed them. Each challenge Meher had faced, financial, emotional, societal, remained real, tangible, and significant. But now, the burdens were shared in consciousness, rather than silently internalized. The narrative of her life, once hidden in shadows, was now bathed in the light of acknowledgement, understanding, and renewed family solidarity. Meher's heart, which had carried quiet suffering for so long, felt a measure of relief. The turning point was not a dramatic resolution of all problems, but a subtle, powerful shift in perception and connection. It was the moment where silence met understanding, where the invisible pain of years became visible in the eyes of those who mattered. The emotional reveal created ripples across the household, shaping interactions, nurturing empathy, and fostering appreciation for a mother whose sacrifices were vast and uncelebrated. Through this turning point, Meher found a new rhythm. She continued her daily responsibilities, but with a renewed sense of validation and emotional support. The children, now aware of their mother's hidden life, approached her with deeper respect and consideration. Samir, transformed by awareness, became a more engaged partner, attentive to the nuanced efforts required to maintain a home and nurture a family. the narrative of hidden struggle, once unacknowledged and solitary, now intertwined with shared understanding. The revelation illuminated the profound depths of maternal devotion, the quiet heroism embedded in everyday acts, and the resilience required to sustain love amidst relentless challenges. Meher's life continued, complex and demanding, yet now underpinned by the transformative power of recognition, a turning point where unseen pain met empathy and endurance met understanding. Even after the revelation, life demanded its relentless pace. Meher continued to navigate the daily currents of responsibility, but something had changed within her. The acknowledgement of her struggles, though quiet, infused her with a subtle strength, a reassurance that endurance need not always be invisible. Her sacrifices remained, but now they were framed by awareness, by a sense that the love and dedication she poured into her family was seen, understood, and appreciated. Each morning, she rose before the children, not from obligation alone, but with a renewed sense of purpose. She prepared breakfasts with meticulous care, arranging plates in ways that brought small smiles, while internally she allowed herself fleeting moments to reflect on her own needs. Sometimes she paused to enjoy the aroma of coffee, to breathe deeply, or to savor a page from a book she had been secretly reading. These small acts of self-preservation were no longer guilt-inducing. They were necessary, affirming that she could care for herself as well as others. Her children, sensing her quiet empowerment, responded with subtle gestures of consideration. Zara, inspired by the journals she had discovered, began to engage more thoughtfully, offering help in chores or sharing her thoughts openly. Arian, once unaware of his mother's inner struggles, began to observe her more closely, noticing the careful ways she balanced tasks, the patience she exercised, the quiet heroism embedded in simple daily acts. These small recognitions reinforced Meher's sense of resilience, reminding her that her life's work was both meaningful and impactful. Samir, transformed by the emotional reveal, became a more present partner. He shared household responsibilities, listened with genuine attentiveness, and began to recognize the labor previously invisible to him. His engagement, while sometimes imperfect, carried sincerity, and Meher allowed herself to receive support without guilt. The dynamic of partnership, once strained by unspoken expectations, slowly shifted toward mutual recognition and shared effort. Meher's resilience was not only about maintaining routines, it was also about finding creative ways to sustain emotional energy. She cultivated quiet moments of reflection, journaling, sketching, or simply observing the world from her window. These acts, small yet profound, provided a balance between external demands and internal needs, reinforcing the delicate equilibrium she had long maintained silently. Sacrifice remained a defining element of her life, but now it was accompanied by intentionality rather than compulsion. Meher chose to forgo certain personal luxuries, yes, but she did so with mindfulness, with a conscious understanding of her priorities and values. Each act of giving, whether listening to a child's worry, preparing a favorite meal, or comforting a distressed family member, was infused with love, not obligation. The quality of her sacrifice transformed, becoming a source of fulfillment rather than only exhaustion. There were still moments of challenge, inevitable strains that tested her resolve. Illnesses, school conflicts, work pressures, and unexpected crises demanded attention and energy. Yet Meher approached each with the wisdom accumulated over years of unseen endurance. She had learned to pace herself, to recognize limits, to seek support when necessary, and to honor the balance between duty and self-care. The hidden struggles of the past had forged a resilience that now allowed her to face adversity without losing herself entirely in its weight. Her children's growth became intertwined with her own empowerment. They observed, learned, and internalized lessons not only of responsibility, but of empathy, courage, and quiet strength. Meher's sacrifices were now visible through the lens of understanding, serving as models of endurance and love that extended beyond mere obligation. Each act, no matter how small, carried dual significance, practical benefit, and moral instruction. Even interactions with neighbors and friends reflected her evolving resilience. She no longer hesitated to assert boundaries, to communicate needs, or to accept help offered. These previously daunting acts became exercises in self-respect, reinforcing the recognition that her well-being mattered alongside that of others. Meher's life was still demanding, still layered with responsibility, yet the emotional burden had shifted, tempered by acknowledgement and self-empowerment. Through subtle rituals and daily practices, Meher demonstrated the delicate art of sustaining resilience. She balanced work and rest, affection and discipline, duty and personal reflection. The house, once a realm of relentless obligation, now vibrated with nuanced harmony. Children thrived under guidance tempered by empathy. Samir engaged with attentiveness and care, and Meher herself moved with quiet confidence. A woman strengthened by years of endurance, now supported by recognition. Her inner monologue, once dominated by guilt and worry, now included gratitude, acceptance, and quiet pride. She reflected on her journey, the sacrifices made, the pain endured, the silent heroism, and allowed herself to feel the profound significance of her choices. Life had not become easier, but it had become more sustainable, richer in emotional depth, and marked by subtle victories. Resilience, Meher realized, was not the absence of struggle, but the ability to navigate it with awareness, integrity, and compassion. Sacrifice was not diminished by self-recognition. Instead, it was amplified in meaning. Her life, complex and demanding, was now framed by intentionality, understanding, and mutual care, a narrative of endurance elevated by connection, insight, and empathy. And in the quiet moments, when the house was still and the children slept, Meher allowed herself to reflect on her strength. She recognized the paradoxical beauty of her existence, the intertwining of hardship and love, invisibility and recognition. exhaustion, and fulfillment. Her life, layered with challenges, was also layered. The house felt different that evening, charged with tension, unspoken words, and the weight of accumulated struggles. Meher moved through the rooms with practiced care, but there was a tightness in her chest, a tremor beneath the surface of her calm. The children had sensed the underlying tension, their chatter subdued, eyes flicking toward her as if anticipating some silent storm. Zara had a school performance that night, a moment meant to be celebratory, yet it arrived amid a cascade of challenges. Arian had a minor accident at home earlier, leaving Meher anxious and exhausted. Samir returned late from work, distracted and tense, preoccupied with deadlines. Each detail, minor on its own, coalesced into a formidable wall pressing down upon Meher, testing her endurance in ways she had never imagined. As she prepared for the evening, her mind raced. Could she manage it all? Could she hold together the family, keep the peace, and ensure every child felt loved and supported? She could, of course. She always did. But this night felt heavier, as if the very weight of unacknowledged sacrifices had crystallized into a tangible force. The school hall was buzzing with parents, teachers, and students, the air thick with anticipation. Meher arrived with Zara, her heart a mixture of pride and anxiety. She scanned the crowd, watching parents greet each other, teachers make last-minute adjustments, and children prepare nervously backstage. The world moved forward in its usual rhythm, oblivious to the silent battles Meher fought daily, battles that had prepared her to endure moments like this with grace and composure. Backstage, Zara fidgeted, nervously clutching her costume. Meher knelt beside her, smoothing hair, adjusting the outfit, whispering words of reassurance. "You've practiced so hard, my love. You'll shine tonight," she murmured. Zara's eyes glistened with unshed tears, a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Meher's own pulse quickened, a reflection of the layered emotions coursing through her, a mother's pride, anxiety, and fierce protective instinct, all intertwined. The performance began. Lights illuminated the stage, music swelled, and the children began their act. Meher watched, heart pounding, as Zara danced and recited lines she had rehearsed countless times. The audience applauded, yet to Meher, the moment was more than applause. It was a culmination of years of effort, resilience, and silent sacrifice. Every leap, every word spoken by Zara was a reflection of the guidance, love, and endurance Meher had poured into her children's lives. Suddenly, during a particularly intricate part of the performance, Zara stumbled. Time seemed to slow. The gasp of a nearby parent echoed faintly, and Meher's heart lurched. But Zara steadied herself, completing the routine with grace, eyes shining with determination. Meher's chest swelled, not with relief alone, but with awe at the resilience mirrored in her child. In that instant, the emotional high of the evening crystallized. The unbroken line of endurance, from Meher to her children, visible and radiant on the stage. After the performance, back at home, emotions remained heightened. Zara was exuberant, narrating every detail to Aryan, who listened with wide-eyed admiration. Samir, too, had experienced a subtle shift, witnessing the culmination of Meher's quiet dedication reflected in the success and happiness of their children. The family gathered in the living room, a fragile calm descending, punctuated by laughter, shared stories, and the unspoken acknowledgement of the day's significance. Yet the climax of emotional intensity was still unfolding. That night, as the children slept, Meher and Samir sat quietly in the kitchen, the glow of the lamp casting soft shadows across their faces. Meher spoke, voice gentle but firm, of the weight she had carried for years, of the sacrifices that had gone unseen, of the resilience that had kept the family afloat. Samir listened, absorbing every word, his own heart stirring with a mix of regret, admiration, and newfound understanding. Tears streamed silently down Meher's face, unashamed and cathartic. Years of suppressed emotions, of quiet endurance, of invisible struggles, poured forth in this intimate moment of recognition. Samir reached for her hand, holding it with a reverence previously absent, his touch a bridge between solitude and shared experience. The emotional peak had been reached, not through dramatic confrontation or conflict, but through the profound vulnerability and acknowledgement of years of unseen labor. In the days following, the household carried traces of this emotional apex. Conversations became richer, more attuned to each other's feelings. The children, inspired by the depth of their mother's devotion and the resilience demonstrated, began to mirror empathy and understanding in subtle ways. Samir, deeply moved, engaged with the family with renewed attentiveness, offering support where previously unrecognized. The climax did not mark an end, but rather a transformative turning point. Meher's hidden struggles had been illuminated, her sacrifices acknowledged, and her resilience validated. The emotional high reshaped the narrative of family life, infusing it with connection, awareness, and shared responsibility. It was a culmination of silent endurance, invisible devotion, and the quiet heroism that had defined Meher's existence for years. Through this peak, Meher realized the paradoxical beauty of life. The weight of unseen struggles could coexist with the power of acknowledgement. The pain of sacrifice could coexist with the pride of nurturing and love. Endurance could transform into inspiration for those who witnessed it. The climax was not just a singular event, it was the apex of years of emotional labor, now recognized, validated, and shared, reshaping the fabric of the family's collective experience. The house felt different that evening, charged with tension, unspoken words, and the weight of accumulated struggles. Meher moved through the rooms with practiced care, but there was a tightness in her chest, a tremor beneath the surface of her calm. The children had sensed the underlying tension, their chatter subdued, eyes flicking toward her as if anticipating some silent storm. Zara had a school performance that night, a moment meant to be celebratory, yet it arrived amid a cascade of challenges. Aryan had a minor accident at home earlier, leaving Meher anxious and exhausted. Samir returned late from work, distracted and tense, preoccupied with deadlines. Each detail, minor on its own, coalesced into a formidable wall pressing down upon Meher, testing her endurance in ways she had never imagined. As she prepared for the evening, her mind raced. Could she manage it all? Could she hold together the family, keep the peace, and ensure every child felt loved and supported? She could, of course. She always did. But this night felt heavier, as if the very weight of unacknowledged sacrifices had crystallized into a tangible force. The school hall was buzzing with parents, teachers, and students, the air thick with anticipation. Meher arrived with Zara, her heart a mixture of pride and anxiety. She scanned the crowd, watching parents greet each other, teachers make last-minute adjustments, and children prepare nervously backstage. The world moved forward in its usual rhythm, oblivious to the silent battles Meher fought daily, battles that had prepared her to endure moments like this with grace and composure. Backstage, Zara fidgeted, nervously clutching her costume. Meher knelt beside her, smoothing hair, adjusting the outfit, whispering words of reassurance. "You've practiced so hard, my love. You'll shine tonight," she murmured. Zara's eyes glistened with unshed tears, a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Meher's own pulse quickened, a reflection of the layered emotions coursing through her, a mother's pride, anxiety, and fierce protective instinct, all intertwined. The performance began. Lights illuminated the stage, music swelled, and the children began their act. Meher watched, heart pounding, as Zara danced and recited lines she had rehearsed countless times. The audience applauded, yet to Meher, the moment was more than applause. It was a culmination of years of effort, resilience, and silent sacrifice. Every leap, every word spoken by Zara was a reflection of the guidance, love, and endurance Meher had poured into her children's lives. Suddenly, during a particularly intricate part of the performance, Zara stumbled. Time seemed to slow. The gasp of a nearby parent echoed faintly, and Meher's heart lurched. But Zara steadied herself, completing the routine with grace, eyes shining with determination. Meher's chest swelled not with relief alone, but with awe at the resilience mirrored in her child. In that instant, the emotional high of the evening crystallized. The unbroken line of endurance, from Meher to her children, visible and radiant on the stage. After the performance, back at home, emotions remained heightened. Zara was exuberant, narrating every detail to Aryan, who listened with wide-eyed admiration. Samir, too, had experienced a subtle shift, witnessing the culmination of Meher's quiet dedication reflected in the success and happiness of their children. The family gathered in the living room, a fragile calm descending, punctuated by laughter, shared stories, and the unspoken acknowledgement of the day's significance. Yet the climax of emotional intensity was still unfolding. That night, as the children slept, Meher and Samir sat quietly in the kitchen, the glow of the lamp casting soft shadows across their faces. Meher spoke, voice gentle but firm, of the weight she had carried for years, of the sacrifices that had gone unseen, of the resilience that had kept the family afloat. Samir listened, absorbing every word, his own heart stirring with a mix of regret, admiration, and newfound understanding. Tears streamed silently down Meher's face, unashamed and cathartic. Years of suppressed emotions, of quiet endurance, of invisible struggles, poured forth in this intimate moment of recognition. Samir reached for her hand, holding it with a reverence previously absent, his touch a bridge between solitude and shared experience. The emotional peak had been reached, not through dramatic confrontation or conflict, but through the profound vulnerability and acknowledgement of years of unseen labor. In the days following, the household carried traces of this emotional apex. Conversations became richer, more attuned to each other's feelings. The children, inspired by the depth of their mother's devotion and the resilience demonstrated, began to mirror empathy and understanding in subtle ways. Samir, deeply moved, engaged with the family with renewed attentiveness, offering support where previously unrecognized. The climax did not mark an end, but rather a transformative turning point. Meher's hidden struggles had been illuminated, her sacrifices acknowledged, and her resilience validated. The emotional high reshaped the narrative of family life, infusing it with connection, awareness, and shared responsibility. It was a culmination of silent endurance, invisible devotion, and the quiet heroism that had defined Meher's existence for years. Through this peak, Meher realized the paradoxical beauty of life. The weight of unseen struggles could coexist with the power of acknowledgement. The pain of sacrifice could coexist with the pride of nurturing and love. Endurance could transform into inspiration for those who witnessed it. The climax was not just a singular event, it was the apex of years of emotional labor, now recognized, validated, and shared, reshaping the fabric of the family's collective experience.